Now, here is spirituality. I've picked three. I'm an existentialist, so I have to say this is existential theology. Beginning with Kierkegaard, where did we see that before? Existential psychotherapy. Paul Tillich, that's the theologian I cut my teeth on in seminary. My systematics professor was a Tillichian. And Tillich comes from the position, I cannot know what God thinks of me, but I can know what I think of God and how that works, and whether that's working or not, which then gives me an indication as to what God is like. And so he begins with the human experience rather than divine revelation, which drives some Christian theologians absolutely crazy, like Barth and the others, absolutely crazy. But I find him to be absolutely stimulating. Then, of course, Carl Rogers. Where do you hear him from? Carl Rogers, I say he's a theologian, spirituality, but he is the beginning of the more person-oriented therapeutic process rather than a mechanistic Freudian. He was the first that said, listen to the patient, and just sit there and listen to them and make sure you are with them by reflecting what they're saying. Rather than, here are the structures you're supposed to explore in this order, which a Freudian would do, okay? So he was the first of, out of that came pastoral care, pastoral counseling, all sorts of stuff, okay? Next slide. Effective spirituality is a well-integrated spirituality, one whose component works together in a synchrony with each other. Conversely, spiritual problems are a reflection of a disintegrated spirituality. And that is that book, Kenneth Pargament. Kenneth Pargament is a psychiatrist-psychotherapist, and significant researcher in the area of spirituality and mental health, and the role that spirituality plays in mental health, along with Harold Koenig out of Duke, etc., and others. But this book was just exploded on me, as we will see, and as we'll see why. So he says, not just spirituality, not just you and me, Lord, but that you and me, Lord, is integrated with everything else. Sound like some things we talked about before in EPT, in existential psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy? Sounds very much alike. Because an integrated spirituality, not just the spirituality, is essential to wholeness. Spirituality that is not integrated into the soul and into the person does not bring about wholeness. Just like age or length of time on this planet does not equal wisdom. It's age or experience plus reflecting on those experiences equals wisdom. Okay? That same thing is true here. And integrated. So in psychotherapy, or in spirituality, of course, God is defined as, in terms of Tillich's thinking, your ultimate concern. Whatever is your ultimate concern, that is your God. What do we perceive to be the ultimate concern of Donald Trump? Power, money, self, himself, ego. And does that affect the way he operates in the world? Tillich would say that's Donald Trump's God, because that's his ultimate concern amongst anything else. Thus, you can use that with non-theists, that definition with non-theists as well as with theists. With Christians, Buddhists, whatever. You can also deal with theists in the same way. A healthy person is aware of finitude And aware of is to have reflected upon and integrated again. It's just saying, oh yeah, I know I'm going to die. No, 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 no. It's not that simple. Have I really thought about it? Have I really experienced it? Have I looked death in the eye? My death in the eye? Then I'm really aware of my finitude. Until then, I'm just playing games with it. It's an intellectual game. It's not a core issue. They are aware of their vulnerability. Finitude allows that. How many people will do anything not to be vulnerable? And you say that your friend is angry? It's probably because he's feeling vulnerable. And it's much easier to yell at you and everybody instead of being vulnerable, because the yelling is an attempt to gain control. And the yelling and the violence or whatever is a means of saying no against this, whatever, against aging, against whatever is happening in aging, because it isn't just aging, it's an experience of aging. And whatever he is experiencing, he's wanting to say no to. This is not what I signed up for. It's not what life is supposed to be. And so I get angry because I don't know anything else to do. People will go to great lengths not to be vulnerable. And yet what is it that aging ultimately teaches us? Ufta, right? To use that Swedish phrase, ufta, okay? Is aware of the self in relationship to the world, is always becoming. By the way, that always becoming, that is not Tillich, though he talks about that. That's really Luther using that word. You're always becoming a Christian. You're always becoming a human being. You're always becoming a person. You are never there. You're always on a journey. And that journey does not end, at least that we are aware of, until we die. What it's going to look like, that journey is going to look like after we're dead, we're going to find out. But it's always a becoming. It's always transcendent. This is what can allow, that was indeed what I experienced, and was able to see it as insight, rather my realization that I felt and I was evil became an insight rather than an anxiety. I now am living more authentically than I ever have been in my life. My wife is absolutely amazed as to how present I am. She says, you laugh more, you're just more connected. I feel more connected to you now than I ever have. And that's all, we were talking about that just this last week. I was driving to Arizona to see family. Existential psychotherapy says the problem is disturbance, in life, is avoiding life's truths and working under the shadow of other people's values and expectations and values. The problem for the existential psychotherapist is that you're not living authentically. You're trying to live a life that you expect other people, that you perceive other people expect you to live. And the issue is, other people nuts. How are you connecting with these issues? And are you living an authentic life of your own? Dissonance, the CBT says, the issue is not disturbance, but is dissonance within the self and the world when a person acts upon beliefs and thus cognitive thoughts that are not true. Ergo, I am evil. For years, for 69 years, my thoughts and beliefs have been filtered through that belief. Now that belief has now gotten from unconscious to conscious, isn't even that I said that I was evil, didn't say I was evil or was a bad person. Yeah, I'd said that for a long time. But that's different than experiencing existentially evil. My voice changed. It felt like an exorcism. It was really weird, but it was very true. For ECBT, it's a dissonance. It's what I think of the world, what I think is supposed to be going on is not right, is not going away. The pain is still as painful as it was. But now this person is sitting in a chair saying, I'm waiting for you to take me down to this person to find out how they're doing. Suddenly, the pain was not the purpose of her life. The pain was not the definition of their life. It is someone else, which again, theologically, is big on. We say in terms of the role of being involved with someone else. And not just because you're involved with someone else because you're better. No, this person was in chronic pain. But she had this transcendent reason to exist. And Jane continued to work for her until now she has a whole book, a whole therapeutic concept around this thing in terms of people in chronic pain. That's our meaning about transcendent. Can see beyond, or can see God in the midst of it. And yes, the presence of God makes me feel better. Okay, that's true too. That's another way of describing the same thing, the same experience. But a healthy person has the freedom to deliberate, decide, and be responsible in deciding. I thought I was free until my last psychotherapy excursion 6 months ago, when I discovered, as I finally, after 15 years, finally got to a core belief. And that core belief probably sounds strange to you. Probably does everybody else. To me, it does not. And that is, I went and I experienced my truth. Didn't just think about it. I experienced my truth that I was ontologically evil. I was the devil incarnate. Where I got that, I don't know. I can point to a lot of things that help formulate that. But how I got there is not important. But when I got there, the important thing in my experience is that I didn't run off and start rationalizing myself away. No, I stayed there. I was evil and nuts. I didn't care who saw it and who knew it, and well, my psychiatrist was there, or the therapist was there, my wife was there. Which those two people caused me then, as I thought about it and reflected on it over a couple, 3 weeks, that's not really true. It is true, that's the way I feel, but my feelings are not the sum total of my reality. That there is something more to Don Koepke than just being evil that is still a part of me. That always will be. But that understanding broke open the doors of so many different things that I thought I was free to deliberate, decide, and be responsible in deciding, but I was not, because I was always looking at my life through these glasses that someday, somehow, someone's going to discover the real truth about Don Koepke. And the real truth was, I'm evil. Not just do evil things. I'm evil. And driving home, my wife constantly said, how can you think that way? And yet, all of a sudden, she got to understand a lot more about me by thinking about how I reacted to things and putting those glasses on. I was not free to deliberate until I got to the ultimate concern, until I got to the ultimate core belief, which most people don't get to, by the way. But I've had 16, 15 years of psychotherapy, and I'm a very reflective, intuitive kind of a person. So I'm a therapist's dream. And also, I think I put her kids through UCLA. I really do. Okay? Now, that's kind of where we go. Well, how is the human problem if we are either our goal is to be integrated, if our goal is to be able to manage, death, isolation, etc., or if our goal is to begin to think differently, understanding our core beliefs and thinking about them as insights rather than something that brings anxiety, which that was indeed what I experienced, and was able to see it as insight rather, my realization that I felt and I was evil became an insight rather than an anxiety. I now am living more authentically than I ever have been in my life. My wife is absolutely amazed as to how present I am. She says, you laugh more, you're just more connected. I feel more connected to you now than I ever have. And that's all, we were talking about that just this last week. I was driving to Arizona to see family. Existential psychotherapy says the problem is disturbance, in life, is avoiding life's truths and working under the shadow of other people's values and expectations and values. The problem for the existential psychotherapist is that you're not living authentically. You're trying to live a life that you expect other people, that you perceive other people expect you to live. And the issue is, other people nuts. How are you connecting with these issues? And are you living an authentic life of your own? Dissonance, the CBT says, the issue is not disturbance, but is dissonance within the self and the world when a person acts upon beliefs and thus cognitive thoughts that are not true. Ergo, I am evil. For years, for 69 years, my thoughts and beliefs have been filtered through that belief. Now that belief has now gotten from unconscious to conscious, isn't even that I said that I was evil, didn't say I was evil or was a bad person. Yeah, I'd said that for a long time. But that's different than experiencing existentially evil. My voice changed. It felt like an exorcism. It was really weird, but it was very true. For ECBT, it's a dissonance. It's what I think of the world, what I think is supposed to be going on is not right, is not true. I move and I function based upon that belief, but that's not true. Spiritual companioning has a similar thing. You will not die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God. The great lie that you can be God. By you being able to make the decisions between what's right and wrong, good and evil, you can now be God. And we struggle with that every day. Thus, it seems as we struggle with dissonance every day. We deal with disturbance every day, and these different groups approach that issue. The human problem, whatever it is unavoidable. Existential psychotherapy say disturbance is inevitable human experience. The question is not so much how to avoid it as how to face it with openness and a willingness to engage life. See, that's, got existential, get in there, deal with, if you will, it's a really great theology of the cross here. Great understanding of the theology of the cross. Or that in some way the Buddhists are right. Life is suffering. That is a good description, but we think it's more than suffering, which the Buddhists don't go. We're go do a different thing. But be that as it may. CBT, every person has cognitive dissonance between what is perceived as true and what is really true for them. The only distinction between human beings is the amount of and the intensity of this dissonance. And spiritual companioning, Paul of Tarsus said it, the good I do not do the good that I want, and the evil I do, but the evil I do not want is what I do. I'm caught in this brokenness that we talked about, as I'm going to be like God. And we're caught in that. Well, see, all the psychotherapies and spiritual and theology and spirituality raises these same questions. They have an understanding of the human and what it wants to work, how well it's best. They have an understanding of what the problem is. They all have an understanding of connecting to the core or the ultimate concern or the ultimate belief or whatever. And they all believe that this struggle is in everybody. It just is a part of life. And so whether you engage a client via existential psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, spirituality, or some creative combination of the three, you have the opportunity to address core beliefs and values. You can have the opportunity to encourage people to look beyond what is perceived to be true and real and ask them, is it? Not you're saying, well, what you're saying isn't true. But no, I'm going to ask you, because you have to decide. Again, I can't decide for you. Is that true? You always have seen yourself with mom dying at age 2, that has left a hole in your life, and you never could understand how that fits, kind of thing. And it was terrible and I don't know what you did. Maybe you're just mad that mom died and whatever, but you've come to some new understanding of that, and you've really asked yourself, is it true? The way I've been behaving about that, believing about that, is it really true? You can help them see themselves as they are, not as they want to be or wish they were. Isn't that a challenge? Isn't that a challenge? Because a lot of our ego is based upon these constructs, these rationalizations that are there to bolster us up, when in reality they're tearing us down. They believe they're bolstering us up, but they're really tearing us down. You can cheer people along as they confront barriers in terms of, because their barriers they have to get around and find a way of dealing with. You can provide them suggestions, you can point them, you can encourage them at various kind of things, but you can't tell them in any way that's going to help them to believe it. And to promote resilience, isn't that a great word? That's a good psychological word, but it's a wonderful word in theology that we don't use that much. Resilience. The ability to take the hard hit. Flexibility. When you get hit, you shift. And being willing to shift. And sometimes, if you don't shift, you break. So what happens with some older adults? I don't want to shift. I don't want to do something new. To think that God is doing something new in my life, I go, huh? I'm in this retirement community, or I'm 85 years old. What do you mean something new? And yet, theologically, we know that is true, that God is always pushing us to something new, and to promote vision, a different understanding, just like the different vision of me, as I finally, after 70 years, came to grips with that basic core belief that I've always had. And I could tell you story upon story upon story as to how that affected me when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, adult, how I probably that is what was a major cause, not the cause, but the major cause in the demise of my first marriage, why it almost demised my second marriage, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And spiritual companioning, clinical behavioral psychotherapy, and existential therapy are all radical, because all of them believe that only the patient then can define what is helpful and what is healthful for them. Freudian psychotherapy says, I know what is helpful for you. And there's a lot of other religious, spiritual things that say, or beliefs that suggest, I'm going to tell you what it is. In fact, that's how I was trained as a pastor, to be a theologian in residence. Not to be a spiritual counselor, not to be a person who seeks to help people grow spiritually in their relationship with God and put their life together and do all these things that we're talking about. No, that was not my goal, what I was taught. At their core, both science and religion grow out of an openness to surprise. Isn't that true? A deep feelings of wonder at the mysteries of the universe, and a desire to make manifest the unmanifest. Or the desire to make conscious the unconscious, if you want to use a Freudian term. Thoughts about that? For me, these are the bridges between psychotherapy, and you asked, how does that work? There are places where we both meet. There are certain that we approach the problem differently. But I would submit that of all things, a spiritual caregiver or spiritual companion should be able to be comfortable dealing with seeking to encourage or to engage the core values which the resident or the person themselves probably has not ever dealt with and are possibly not even aware of. And you just know they're aware. You just know that it is. You have no idea what the content is. You have no idea about it, but you just follow the nose. You do a Rogerian thing and just follow the nose and encourage people, provide a safe place. Because that's why I was able to do that, by the way. It was a safe place. And it was safe for me to want my therapist to die on the spot. And I could envision her just poof. I was safe to feel that way and to believe that I could. See, the extent of that core belief is radical. It is also interesting is the practice of mindfulness. Think contemplation, but also think existential psychotherapy and behavioral cognitive therapy, both of which encourage mindfulness. In fact, I have a book on cognitive behavioral therapy that has discs in it. And what they are is PowerPoint slides for teaching of clients about spirituality. Really interesting as you look at it from a psychological point of view. It's really interesting and very enlightening, by the way. So mindfulness, we're going to go through this relatively quickly. Spiritual practices for the mind, I'm sure you're familiar with some of these. Lectio Divina, centralizing visualization, Jesus prayer. There's things in your packet on how to lead meditation prayer groups. There's a thing there on spiritual prayer beads, as things. Anything to get people to reflect on their life and what's happening and to become mindful. Mindfulness is a way of paying attention to a particular way, that it's on purpose, it is at the present moment, and it's non-judgmental. By the way, that's another wonderful book. Wherever you go, there you are. He's a Buddhist out in New York and works in a mental health setting. Wonderful stuff. He also does this thing, living the catastrophic life. Doesn't that sound like a theology of the cross? Living a catastrophic life, because he sees the catastrophic as good, not bad. Interesting. Mindfulness is not a passive resignation, like contemplation. You're going to go and meditate, that I just passively resign to whatever's happening to me. It focuses on the present, kind of an engaged attention. You really are going on it. Intentionally welcoming whatever arises, even if it is experienced as negative. What you experience is, period. Non-judgmental, go for it. You are seeking to release the knee-jerk attempt to fix. We get a negative feeling and we want to fix that feeling, when really maybe we should stay with that feeling and learn from that feeling. And treating thoughts as passing mental events that they are. Thoughts, and I would also say feelings, are not reality. And yet, I feel so bad. And it seems as though that is the definition of reality, when that is not true. There is more to it than just your feelings. It seeks to turn off the automatic pilot, just kind of going through life. It seeks to break the fight-flight syndrome, which is, you get into brain stuff here, but the fight-flight syndrome is a part of the autonomic system of the brain that is not connected to the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is where you think and you make decisions. The fight or flight syndrome or thing goes immediately from the brain to the muscles. And so you want to try to stop that, settle it down, relax, so that you can think more rather than just react. That knee-jerk reaction, the fight or flight syndrome, aids in the switch from a doing mode, I got to be doing, to a being mode, which is what, again, this person who has lots of pain, maybe some help in her of just being, learning to be, even within the pain. Is that easy? Can that be a goal? A therapeutic goal? A pastoral goal? It provides the patient, or whatever, with emotional space. In other words, rather than reacting, I can back and by being mindful, by thinking on it, by meditating on whatever it is, positive, negative, whatever comes, it gives me some space. It fosters an early warning system, which then you start to understand when you are starting to feel that way. I know when I'm feeling anxious because I am depressive with anxiety overtones. And I can tell the difference in my own body as to what is depression and what is anxiety, and the treatment for that, or even the behavioral thing for that for me to deal with is different. Well, if it's anxiety, it's one thing. If it's depression, it's another thing. I've learned how to do that over years. Okay? But that's what we're talking about, early warning system. You start feeling those feelings or those thoughts, and you start going, oops. Usually that means I'm going to do this. Do I really want to do this? Okay? And it breaks the cycle of rumination. Meditation does. Mindfulness does. And where you just ruminate on the problem. My pain is here, and I ruminate on my pain. And think about the pain all the time, because that is what defines me. Instead, it allows you to break that cycle, giving you time, allowing you to think, to activate the frontal lobe, So mindfulness is used in these therapies. The treatment of depression, anxiety, bipolar disease, eating disorders, borderline personality disorder, all of them are moving strongly in the area of mindfulness as a process to help people to deal with these issues. Psychology and religion can be friends. Now, don't ask which is which. Don't ask which is which. Use your imagination. I personally, the spirituality or religion is the big one.